Welcome back, board members. The boardroom is open, and today we're going to do a short tutorial on how to play Sub Terra. Sub Terra is a 1 to 6 cooperative kind of horror game where you are a group of cave explorers falling down a deep shaft, and now you're super far underground and trying to escape. Let's kick this off with going over the components, then we'll get right into gameplay. So why don't we start with the major component of this game, and that's the cave tiles. Start with the entrance tile. And there are some squeeze tiles. There's some cliffs and slope tiles. I have some cave-in tiles. Water hazard tiles. There's some hazardous terrain tiles. Terror tiles, or horror tiles. Gas tiles. And of course, the exit tile. There are also basic tiles that you'll be using throughout the game that don't have any hazards whatsoever. The game also comes with 30 hazard cards, as is marked by the flashlight. 1 out of time card. Notice how the flashlight is dim, and the other side says out of time, noting that it's the end of the game. Some tokens include blood tokens, cave-in tokens, explosive tokens for blowing holes in the walls, rope tokens used to scale cliffs and slopes, gas marker reminder, the horror reminder, first player marker, the skill die, 8 different player boards, and meeples for all the different people. There are 8 different player boards in all, and I will go through each and every one of those in depth at the end of this video. To go along with the player boards, there are also health tokens. Now that we've gone over the components for this game, there's a couple decisions you need to make before we can move on to setup. Those decisions are how many cavers you're going to play with, and then are you going to do advanced, normal, or expert mode. For the purpose of this tutorial, we're going to run 4 cavers under normal mode. Now that we've chosen a difficulty setting and a number of cavers, it's time to pick the cavers. For this example, I've chosen the bodyguard, the engineer, the climber, and the diver. You'll also take their matching caver pieces and place health tokens on each of the player boards, just like this. You can see the bodyguard has more health than everybody else. Place the starting cave tile in the center of the table. Place all the caver pieces onto it. This is where we begin our adventure, but this cave will spiral from here. Now it's time to prepare the tile stack. Set aside the exit tile. Shuffle the remaining 64 cave tiles. Just like so. I don't belong in Vegas. I'm clearly not a clean shuffler. But for the purpose of this tutorial, you get the idea. Once all shuffled, randomly shuffle the exit tile with 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you're going to put this on the bottom of the tile stack. Just like so. Give the starting player marker to the caver who last went underground. Let's call it the diver. For the hazard cards, you're going to use 22 for the normal level. Be sure to remove the cards that have the amount of stars indicated by the chart in the rulebook, depending on the difficulty setting you choose for the game. At the bottom of this deck, you're going to want to place the out of time card, noting that the game is coming to an end, your flashlights run out of batteries, and things are going to get wild. And that's it. Everything's set up and ready to go. Remember, we're playing this tutorial with 4 cavers on normal mode. So let's get back to the table and dig into those rules. Beginning with the starting caver and proceeding clockwise, Each caver is given 2 action points to spend on any number of actions. Let's talk about the basic actions. The first basic action is reveal. Choose the tile you're on, choose a side of the tile you're on, and reveal the next tile. That costs 1 action. Another basic action that costs 1 action is the move action. Take your caver and simply move them 1 tile. Another action that only costs 1 action is the explore action. Choose your caver, choose a side of the tile to explore, draw the top tile of the cave deck, place it, and then move onto it. This is a way to explore the cave much faster. Some basic actions cost both of the actions for your turn, one of which is the run action. Run allows you to move 3 spaces. 1, 2, 3. Then there's the heal action. You can either spend 2 actions to repair a hit point on yourself, or if you share a tile with another caver, you can spend 2 actions to give them an extra hit point as well. Remember, you cannot exceed your starting number of hit points. Moving on to hazard actions. Hazard actions generally cost 2 actions. For example, swim. To swim, you move your marker onto a water tile that has a flood token. You can also squeeze through a squeeze tile for 2 actions. You can dig out rubble from an adjacent tile for 2 actions. You can place a rope for 2 actions by making a skill check, and if successful, place a rope on your current tile. That's a failure. You succeed on any skill check by rolling a 4, a 5, or a 6. No rope for you. You can also spend 2 actions to make a hide check, to hide from any of the horrors that are on the board. We'll go over horrors in a minute. The last action you can take is exertion. At any time during your turn, you can make a skill check to exert yourself, thus giving you 1 extra action point. If you fail the exertion check, you lose 1 hit point. Be sure to only do this in the most dire of circumstances. You don't have many hit points to begin with. Once all the cavers have taken their actions, we move on to the horror phase. If there were any horrors that were spawned on the board, they would activate now, moving 1 space closer to the nearest conscious caver. If there are no conscious cavers within 7 steps of a horror, that horror is removed from play. Now we move on to the hazard phase. In the hazard phase, you reveal the top card of the hazard deck, and something bad pretty much happens. You didn't think this was going to be easy, did you? The hazard deck consists of the following cards. Tremor cards. Tremors require that all conscious cavers make a skill check. Any caver that fails will lose 1 hit point. Horrors. All the horrors on the board will move again 1 step closer to the nearest conscious caver. Then, if there are less than 3 horrors on the board, spawn 1 horror at the nearest tile closest to a conscious caver. Floods. This is how water tiles get flood tokens. Place a flood token on all water tiles on the board that don't have one, and all cavers on water tiles will lose 1 hit point. Gas card. All cavers on gas tiles would lose 2 hit points. Until the next hazard phase, any caver who enters a gas tile will additionally lose 2 hit points. I like to use the gas token as a reminder that it's in effect until the next phase. Last is the cave-in card. You'll roll the die, and any tiles matching that number with the cave-in number get a rubble token. All cavers on these new tiles lose 3 hit points. Ouch. Last is the end phase, moving the start player marker clockwise and starting a whole new round. Last is the end phase. Move the first player marker clockwise and set up for the next round. If the out of time card is now in play, each caver on the board has to make a skill check. If they fail, they are devoured by the horrors of the cave and removed from the game. The game ends when all remaining cavers are on the exit tile or no cavers are left in the cave. All right, spelunkers, that's the basics of Sub Terra, the horror, cooperative, cave exploration, cave escape game. Now let's take a look at all the different people you can be while playing this game. Let's start with the bodyguard. For one action, it says repel. Remove a horror on an adjacent tile from the cave. Be gone, horror. It also has protective. You start the game with 5 hit points, and other cavers on your tile don't lose any from floods, gas, cave-ins, or tremors. Flood token goes on. All cavers would lose a hit point. Instead, the engineer is safe, and only the bodyguard loses a hit point. Let's move on to the engineer. For 2 actions, the engineer can demolish. Stuck in a dead-end place, nowhere to go? No problem. Use a demolition token to blast a hole in that wall and escape to freedom. They also have the passive ability Vigilant. Cave-ins only cause them to lose 1 hit point instead of all 3. Let's move on to the climber. For 1 action, the climber may rig by placing a rope token on their current ledge tile or slide tile. Goodbye, ledge. Hello, rope. They also have the agile passive ability. They may use a move action to enter squeeze tiles or to enter tiles with rubble tokens. Time to talk about the diver. For 2 actions, the diver may dive. If you're on a water tile, remove your caver piece from the cave. On your next turn, instead of performing any actions, place your caver piece on any other water tile. Good for getting across the map fast when the water tiles are far apart. Their amphibious passive states you don't lose any hit points from flood. Flood tile hits, they lose 0 hit points. And they may use move actions to enter tiles containing floods. They also don't have to use 2 actions to enter a tile containing a flood. Now it's time to talk about the Scout. Their Pathfinder ability says if you would place any tile, you may discard that tile and place the next one instead. You must place the new tile. Their Stealthy ability says you cannot be chosen as the closest victim for any horror, and sharing a tile with a horror does not cause you to lose any hit points. If there's horrors on the board moving around, they never choose the Scout as their target. If they're ever stuck on a tile where a horror would spawn, they wouldn't lose any hit points. Pretty stealthy indeed. Who doesn't love a good medic? For 1 action, the medic does exactly what you think they would do. They choose another caver on their tile to regain 1 hit point. They have a second ability called Sprint. For 1 action, they can perform 2 move actions. Let's bring out the Geologist. The Geologist has a 1-cost ability, remove a rubble marker from this tile or an adjacent tile. Their intuitive passive ability states, at the start of the game, set aside the top tile of the cave stack, face up. Whenever you would place a tile from the cave tile stack, instead set that tile aside face up. Then place either of the 2 tiles. How about less gas? Let's bring on the Leader. The Leader has a 1-cost ability called Direct. Choose another conscious caver, they may immediately perform an action costing 1 action. Use this ability at most once each turn. The Leader could really get that medic on the move. Could also make the Geologist remove some rubble. Have that Explorer throw a rope. The Diver couldn't dive because it costs 2 actions. Their passive ability is to add 1 to all their skill check rolls, so they succeed on a 3 or higher. And that's it for all the 8 different cavers you can be. Mix and match them, trying to find the best combinations. That's what really will bring a lot of replayability to this game. Now that we've talked about the cavers, we've talked about the turn, what you can do, what you can't do, let's dig a little bit more into the horrors, the bad guys, into the game, because they activate a little differently. Let's say this is the example we have set up for a 5-player game. The Scout, the Bodyguard, Engineer, Diver, and Leader. They've just finished taking their actions, so now it's the horror phase. I remove this reminder marker to remind me that the horrors move now. All horrors that are spawned on the board will move 1 space closer to the nearest conscious caver. Now the Scout would be the nearest conscious caver, however, their Stealthy ability states you cannot be chosen as the closest victim for any horror, and sharing a tile with a horror does not cause them to lose any hit points. So they're out of the running. You've got 1-2 spaces from the Engineer, or 1, 2, 3 spaces from the bodyguard. So engineer it is. Rar. Then we move on to the hazard phase. Draw the top card of the hazard deck, and if it's a horror card, all the spawn horrors move again, thus chomping this engineer. They fall unconscious, losing all hit points. Then, if there are less than 3 horrors on the board, another horror comes into play, spawning on the nearest horror tile closest to a caver, a conscious caver. Would be this tile right here, nearest to the diver who still has 2 hit points left. I would say generally they're in a lot of trouble, but the bodyguard has that ability that this, for one action, they can remove an adjacent horror from the board. It's not as bad as it looks. If during the horror phase, the horrors are farther than 7 away from any conscious caver, they'll be removed from the board. In this case, 1, 2, 3, 4, they would not be removed. If, however, all cavers were here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, they still wouldn't be removed. They'd need to be one more further away for this horror to go home. And that's it. That's Sub Terra, just the base game. There are a few expansions for the game. I've yet to check those out. Maybe you have. I'd love to hear about it if you have played them. Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. I appreciate you watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If so, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe for more content like this. I'd love to deliver it to you. And as always, we'll catch you at the next boardroom meeting.